What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Boozers Basketball Podcast. We got a special 4th of July episode where we are about 4 or 5 days into free agency. Lots to talk about. I'm here with my co-host Vanik Panosian and Panos George. How you guys doing today?
Hey, what's up?
Good, Neil.
Glad to hear it. So Kevin Durant has pretty much taken the NBA hostage by requesting a trade from the Nets. So what are your early impressions on that, Panos? Like what's possible in terms of a return for Kevin Durant? And we'll probably have another episode to talk about this in the future, but I just want to get both of your guys' early impressions on that move, and then we'll get to things that have actually already happened because there is a lot of speculation going on in the league right now.
So you want me to talk about Kevin Durant right now? I mean, it's like you said, it's a long subject, but let's just make it as quick as possible with KD. So he asked for a trade. He has 4 years left on his contract. He picked out his two teams, right? Suns and Miami. And then he was open to going back to Golden State, and then also Toronto is like a dark horse in this. I mean, it's kind of hard. Like Miami and the Suns, they don't have all the pieces to make a straight up trade unless they include an all-star. Like the Suns need to give up Booker, but KD wants to play with Booker, and then KD wants to play with Butler and Bam on the other team with Miami. So it's kind of hard. You almost have to bring a third team in. And then the Warriors, out of all of them, have all the pieces, but I wouldn't give up all that young talent to go get someone who's 33, 34 years old with 4 years left on his contract. And then with that Achilles injury, even though he did bounce back pretty well the following year, it's just a lot of investment. You know what I mean? His contract's pretty big. I think he's getting paid in the mid 40s or something like that. So if I'm any of those teams, I wouldn't trade any of their young superstars like Booker, Bam,
Zion.
I don't know. Yeah. So like I wouldn't do that. That's just me though. But like I'm sure there's people out there that's like, it's Kevin Garnett. I'm sorry, it's Kevin Durant. Like he's gonna win us a championship. Do it. Pull the trigger.
Right. So Vanig, quick early impressions on what you think Brooklyn can be with potentially Ben Simmons as their best player if they lose KD and Kyrie.
Couple of things too. I want to touch on the Durant thing too, man. I want to just say this shit with players dictating where they want to go and then now who they want to get traded for is out of control. And I am always on the side of the players, but the league needs to have a lockout on this next collective bargaining agreement, because you sign a 4-year extension with the Nets and then you pull this on an organization, like the owners need to be livid. And then like Panos just said, hey, yeah, I want to go play for Phoenix, but you also can't ask, like Booker needs to stay there. Chris Paul needs to stay there. So what, Kevin Durant wants to get traded for Jay Crowder and Bridges. You know what I mean? Like this is out of control, dude. Like these guys are running the league.
What he's trying to get done with in terms of Phoenix.
So that stuff's bugging me. As far as Ben Simmons and Kyrie sticking around back with the Nets, the sooner the Nets are bad, as a Rockets fan, super excited about it, because we own all their draft picks all the way to 2027 with straight first round picks unprotected, and then pick swaps every year in between. So if that's what they want to run with, great. I mean, Kyrie, again, just like Durant, is trying to strong arm his way to the Lakers. So who knows what they're going to get in terms of, I think Russ is the only part of the equation that makes sense because of the contract and what they're trying to do with LA with Le GM. But Ben Simmons, I mean, it is the ragtag group of just Ben Simmons hasn't played basketball in almost 2 years. The guy sat out. He's 24 years old and he's complaining about his back like he's some 60-year-old man. And we thought he was playing a stunt with the Sixers, that he was just trying to sit out because he was disgruntled. But I mean, he went to the Nets and we didn't even see him suit up for the Nets. So, I mean, the trouble, but like I said, they got to, as an organization, they got to do what's best for them. They got to get picks and they got to get young talent.
I just want to add to that, like real quick, like the Nets are asking for a lot. I think they're asking for like 2 superstars or like an up and coming star, an all-star. And then at least 3 first-round picks. I mean, that's a lot to give up for KD, who's already at that age. But like, I'm just going to touch on this real quick. Like, you saw Gobert. I think you got like 4 or 5 first-round picks with Utah. Like 5, right? That's insane. Like, now you know what Nets are going to ask for. Imagine that. Like, it's ridiculous.
And there's only a couple of teams that could actually pull this off, where they have the combination of young talent and quality draft picks to make this deal work. So let's put that on pause. That's going to warrant its own episode in the future. But yeah, Panos, you did touch on the Rudy Gobert trade. So because of the fact that free agency has been slow outside of Jalen Brunson signing on, and then you saw a bunch of max sort of extensions take place, was there anything that caught your eye in terms of like early sort of transactions?
I mean, we already knew Ja was going to get his extension. Booker, even though I don't think he's a max player, Cat got his. Out of all the people that got him, I think Jokic was the most deserving out of it. One person that caught me off guard was, I know it's the Pelicans and they're trying to lock down Zion, but I mean, he got paid like 183, 195 million or something like that for 5 years. It's ridiculous. And he's only played like, I think 80 games in his whole career there so far. So it's, I don't know, man. It's just insane how I've seen all this money just getting thrown around. I'm sure I'm missing one more player. I just can't think of the other name that got him maxed.
Bradley Beal got paid.
Beal, that's right. Who he took tech. So it just tells me he took money over winning a championship. But I mean, who knows? Maybe Washington might be able to make some trades or something and bring an extra player in to help him out. But I don't see that happening.
You mentioned the Rudy Gobert trade. So it seems like Utah might be in the process of tearing things down. So let's start with Utah's perspective. They unload Rudy Gobert. They get a bunch of draft picks. I think they got Walker Kessler, who was just drafted recently. So with Utah sending the signal to the league, does that mean Donovan Mitchell's next to get traded? Or do you think they're trying to clear the slate and kind of let Donovan Mitchell start building this team back up with all their young talent and future draft capital that they have in the works?
So to me, they have 2 options, right? You keep Donovan Mitchell, you build around them, or you trade him. I mean, but if I'm Donovan Mitchell, I'm not going to sit around and let these draft picks come up and get developed. I'm not going to wait around for Utah to do anything, because right now he's just stuck there with a bunch of young talent, a ton of picks, and there's no one there to help him. So I'm thinking that eventually they're going to trade him. And we mentioned Miami with KD, but like Miami is rumored to have already made an offer for him. So I think he's friends with Jimmy Butler. So in Miami,
from a Miami perspective, that is such a great fit.
Oh yeah.
You bring in Donovan Mitchell and you might become the favorite in the East, I think, because point guard was an area of concern for them. Kyle Lowry was injured, so maybe it's not fair to judge him based on what he did, but he's getting up there in age. But if you trade for Donovan Mitchell, like, you immediately turn back the clock 10 years in terms of who's playing point guard for you. And you got a good squad. I mean, you got Butler, Bam, and Donovan Mitchell as like a very, very solid big three. So if Utah does go that route, I think they should trade Donovan Mitchell. They could probably get a good offer from the Heat too, in terms of maybe like a Tyler Hero, a bunch of draft picks. But yeah, to your point, the trade market has really gotten distorted in terms of what these stars are fetching. So Vanek, I'll ask you, what do you think Gobert's fit is with Minnesota?
It's interesting. I didn't see it coming at all, but I think it was a move that they, as far as available players that they could target, I think it was somebody they had to do. I think they're trying to show Karl Anthony Towns too that he's got one more year on his deal. That, hey, like, we're invested in winning and we're committed to winning and we're getting, whatever we can get. And they didn't give up any key players, as far as, D'Angelo Russell's still there, obviously Anthony Edwards, Cat. I mean, Pat Beverly was kind of an emotional spark, but I mean, again, he's up there too, so he's pretty expendable. So it's interesting. Cat definitely rolls into the 4. I mean, they've got probably the longest team in the league now in terms of wingspan at every position. So pretty crazy. Do I think that it puts them as the number one seed and a clear favorite in that regard. No. So, I think it puts them in the 4-5 seed area. And I still see them, maybe second round exit or Western Conference Finals at best. So it's kind of sad to say if you pull off a trade that big and you're giving up that many draft picks and leveraging your future, I think you want to feel a little bit better about the team you've compiled with it.
I just want to add to that real quick.
Yeah,
Sorry. So like the other name that was being tossed around from Minnesota, who was a cheaper option and had 1 year left on his contract, was Miles Turner. And they could have probably gave up a lot less for Miles Turner. It's like, hey, you want it? Let's try this. Let's try another big man with Cat. So Cat can go out and like spread the floor, stretch it out a bit, right? Okay, why not do Miles Turner, who's a cheaper option? Yeah, he stretches out as well, but at least he can be a rim protector and Cat can be more offensive. And then you invest in Gobert instead, who has like 3 or 4 years left on his contract. I don't know, but it's more money too. Miles Turner was only getting paid 18 or 20 million max. And it's like, let's try it. If it works for 1 year, we'll extend it. If not, we'll move on from it. They should have gone that route.
Miles Turner is a better offensive player than Rudy Gobert as well. You're not getting someone who's so tilted to one side of the floor. Vonnie, did you want to say something?
Yeah. You guys both hit it. And I agree. And I think one of the things is like, when you guys are talking right now about like, hey, is like Utah still vested with Donovan Mitchell? I don't think they're already selling him off and like, going to trade him. I really think that Gobert was an issue for them. And I think, again, this last, round of playoffs for them, they saw again how he gets exploited. And you cannot have a max level center on your team that come crunch time, the last 4 or 5 minutes of the game, they go small and you actually have to put him on the bench is crazy. He's such a liability. And where you guys just said Miles Turner or having somebody that's more of a stretch 5 that can space the floor and still hit a jumper and not just be a lob threat is important. So I think Utah finally realized that, and that's why they wanted to get away with it, because I think for them, you want to keep Mitchell happy. You don't want to just keep being a second round exit. So you have to do something. And I think if the right offer comes for the Jazz, then Mitchell's going to get traded. But that's where he hurts you, man. He hurts you.
Dude, Utah's laughing. They took 5 picks away and got a center back. That's what we're doing right there.
Absolutely. So before the Gobert trade went down, we saw DeJounte Murray get traded to the Hawks. And Bonnie, we had a conversation about where the Hawks were in terms of the East ladder. And I was like, this team is probably a 7 or 8 seed. But now they get Murray into the mix. So Panos, I'll ask you, do you think Murray moves the needle as much as it might appear because he's an all-star coming off of a terrific season where he averaged 21, 8, and 9? Those are the kind of collection of numbers you just don't see very often. But there is sort of a narrative around DeJounte Murray that he's kind of a good stats, bad team guy. So now that he's going into the situation in Atlanta where expectations have been raised because of this trade and his pairing with Trae Young, do you think he has the ability to make the Hawks approach the Eastern Conference Finals where they got to 2 years ago?
I mean, there's a few things you have to look at here. So like that trade, the Spurs got 3 first-round picks with that, right? Was it 3 or 4?
3.
It's 3? Okay.
So 3. So DeJounte Murray was so good with San Antonio because he mostly had the ball in his hands and he was controlling the pace of the game, right? You have Trae Young in there. So to get the most value out of DeJounte Murray, he needs the ball in his hands. And Trae Young needs to learn how to play off the ball, wrap around screens. That's how it's going to work. Or you have to like stack them as far as like rotations go. Does it move the needle? Maybe a little bit, but you still have teams like you still have Milwaukee. You still have Boston who loaded up, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
We're going to get to that in a minute. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and then you still have Heat who haven't really made any moves yet. So I'm still expecting them to make a big splash in the free agency market or like in a trade. So does it move the needle? Yes, a little bit. They did hold on to John Collins, who they still want to move, right? They have Capella. They have Trae. Huerta. Who's the other dude? I can't think of their other guy.
Herder's gone.
Bogdanovich?
He left? Bogdanovich. Sorry, Bogdanovich.
Herder went.
Yeah, but like I said, if you want the most value out of him, you need him on the ball to get anything out of him.
Yeah,
As far as
as far as I'm
goes.
concerned, I think the top four in the East is pretty solid. The three teams you mentioned, Milwaukee, Boston, Miami, and I'm gonna put Philly in fourth. So now we're talking about a potential opening beginning at number 5. I think who was the fifth seed? Toronto was, right, last year in the playoffs. I still would take Toronto over Atlanta
Yeah,
right now,
I
given
do want
where we're at. Yeah.
I do want to add that DeJounte Murray does help him defensively though, because he
That
was
was a huge issue for Atlanta last year.
yeah.
They were
So
a
help
terrible
him there.
defensive team.
Mhm.
So, Vonnie, I'll ask you about the Spurs. So, this might be looked at as the Spurs selling high on their best players. So, maybe they know something that we don't know in terms of, look, we kind of reached our ceiling with Murray. We're like a play-in team. So, we could probably strike while the iron's hot, get a really good return for Murray. That's the way I would interpret it because I trust Greg Popovich's instincts on this. But he was a really big part of that team. Do you think that this trade was warranted from the Spurs, given where they're at right now?
It was premature. I mean, Murray's so young, and so you were kind of in a rebuild anyway, right? I mean, between you also had Keldon Johnson on there, but by giving Murray up, I mean, you're chasing a number 1 pick. They're going into full rebuild, which was surprising. Like I said, I think you could have held on to Murray, and still done that. But like I said, with the draft compensation they got, and I think what you just said, I think where they can just rebuild. Then I think the other part too is I know a lot of teams are eyeing Victor Wembanyama in this next draft, so the Spurs want to get their name in that hat too, because I think, like I said, that guy's going to be a big franchise cornerstone for any franchise that drafts him. So
Yeah, it seems
rebuild.
like the Spurs are trying to get worse when a lot of the teams in the West are trying to get better.
Can I
So
add something to DeJounte Murray? He did come out and say that he didn't want to waste any years at a young age. So he met up with whoever in the front office and said he wants to move on. So that was one of the reasons the Spurs traded him too. And the good thing is they got 3 first-round picks on top of that. So
yeah, the trade market has definitely gotten distorted. Like if Gobert and Murray are fetching this kind of return, the Nets are going to want a king's ransom for KD. So that'll be interesting to watch develop. And yeah, so Panos, you mentioned this a little earlier. We got to talk about Malcolm Brogdon to the Celtics. I think in terms of all the trades that have taken place, this might have the biggest impact on the championship race. Would you disagree or agree with that statement, Panos?
I would agree with that statement 100%.
Yeah.
You got Malcolm Brogdon, right?
Because you're a Celtics fan, right?
Absolutely. You see the purple. That's actually green. I'm colorblind.
He's going he wants championship 18 so they can take the lead over the Lakers.
I mean, the Celtics, they gave up a bunch of I'm not saying they're no names, but like a bunch of below average scrubs, right? You got Malcolm Brogdon, who's making 20 million, 20-ish, 21, I think. He's coming off the bench. Just seeing him as a 6-man, it helps with his history of injuries coming off the bench. It helps Boston with an actual ball handler, a high IQ, great vision. He's like 90% from the free throw. He's about 40 from 3, and he's like close to 50, I think, in his field goal percentage overall. That doesn't mean
rookie of the year.
People forget. Yeah, that's right. And he dunked on LeBron, like in his rookie year, I think too. But like, dude, this is exactly what they wanted. They wanted the ball handler. That doesn't mean that Marcus Smart, Jason Tatum, and Jalen Brown don't work on their ball handling skills.
Yeah, 100% true. Do you think this trade makes the Celtics the favorite in the East?
It's hard to say right now. I think that moves the needle a lot, but I also think because the Bucks were hurt during the playoffs, you need to see what they're going to do with Middleton back 100% too, and if they can stay healthy in the playoffs. And we need to see what Miami does. It's not over yet. Teams are still trying to make moves and get better. So, I mean, right now they're all chasing the Warriors, right? They're all trying to compete and make sure they can contend with them.
Vonnick, how about you? Do you think this trade of Malcolm Brogdon to the Celtics makes them the favorite in the East?
I would still go Bucks first if healthy, and then I'd put Boston number 2. But yes, this move 100% answers the needs that we discussed for the Celtics, where I think Marcus Smart's a great player and you don't need to trade him. And yeah, he's not the traditional point guard. And if they're going to stagger him and he's going to be coming off the bench, it's perfect, because in those moments where you need a floor general and somebody to run an offense for you, where Marcus Smart struggles there a little bit, right? He's your defensive, kind of pit bull guy. Brogdon can slow it down. And like I said, doesn't need to just dump the ball off to Tatum or Brown and say, hey, go get me a bucket. So it answers a lot of their needs.
Yep.
So I think we all agree that the Celtics are a big winner in terms of the first few days of free agency. Are there any other sort of under the radar teams that you think did a good job in the early going, Panos?
No, not really. I mean, nothing's really popped up in my head. I do like how Philly, though, with James Harden opted out. He's thinking about winning a championship, so he didn't opt into his big contract. He's going to take less so he can help the team out. It seems like PJ Tucker's going to go there for 3 years, 32, 33 million. And it looks like I just want to see what Harden's going to do as far as like contract and like what he's going to get to help out a little bit more.
And they made that draft day trade for DeAnthony Melton, who is respected around the league in terms of being a good bench piece.
That's right. I did forget about that. Good call.
Yeah, I want to piggyback off that too. So the Philadelphia Rockets, they look tough, bro. They literally four first acquisitions were all former Rockets. So Daryl Morey is definitely reassembling the Houston 2018 team. They got PJ Tucker, they got Daniel House, they re-signed, and then they got Melton in the trade, who was one of Morey's first picks when he was at Houston before Houston traded him away. So the Sixers got with PJ Tucker, and you're answering huge needs there where you want the best corner 3-point shooter. I think like the last 3 seasons in the league has been PJ Tucker back on that offense, where Harden knows exactly how to play with him. And then we know what he does from a defensive anchor, pit bull attitude perspective, where the Sixers need that, somebody chippy that's going to get, after the loose ball, he's going to be an agitator. And I think he fits well with Embiid. So the Sixers and what Harden, obviously he's going to re-sign. I like what they're doing. Do I think they're the favorite? No, but they're going to be a tough out. And like I said, if they get it gelling and maybe add another player here or there, Eric Gordon, of course, another Rocket, also rumored to Sixers still. So, these guys are definitely aging. Their window is already past. So like I said, it'll be interesting to see how it comes together.
I think they also need to try to move to
big value is going to be in the locker room, like what you said, the toughness, because we have classified the 76ers being pretty soft. They've been exposed in the playoffs multiple times for that. And then PJ Tucker, he's just like a no-nonsense guy that will really be good in the locker room. I don't think there's any doubt that he's going to get along with Joel Embiid. He's already played with Harden, so he knows his game, as you mentioned, Vonnig. And Penis, did you want to add anything?
I also think I think they should try to make a move and move Tobias Harris's contract out of that roster somehow, if they can.
That would be a very savvy move. It's just a matter of if there's a market for him right now. But that remains to be seen. Yeah, Tobias Harris could become a very person that you could get rid of. Philadelphia, they got enough scoring, I think. And Tobias Harris is just like a big contract on your books that is kind of, I don't want to call him dead weight because he is still a good player, but I think it's just like an overpay as he ages in this during this contract.
Yeah,
so, Vonnig, were there any teams that you would probably label as a loser in the first few days of free agency?
Loser. If I was going to go that right, I want to give one shout out. I like the Clippers signing of John Wall. I think that was an underrated move on their part. I think that was already rumored before the buyout with the Rockets ever even happened, and even last season. But with Kawhi and Paul George coming back healthy, I think the Clippers, they need to be feared, because Tyronn Lue is Ty Lue's a great coach, and the Clippers, they're going to make some noise. I think that they're a team for sure that they can go toe to toe with the Warriors. So like I said, if you get even a little bit from John Wall, which I know he's capable based off what I saw last year, I think it's going to be a big win for them. I think kind of a loss, man. I think the worst contract that I felt like I saw was Lou Dort with OKC was a complete 4 or 5 years, like 80 million or something like that. And I was thinking like, man, he's a pretty comparable player to like a Jayshawn Tate. And I just thought that contract was just kind of pretty eye opening. But besides that, I thought everything else has been pretty much within reason.
Yeah, I think the Lou Dort deal, it's a fact that OKC has to pay somebody. I think there's like a salary floor they need to meet. So they needed to deal that money out somewhere. And they really like what Dort's done as he's progressed through. 17 million isn't like excessive in my opinion, but they didn't really have a choice because they have to spend money to get to reach the salary floor. So I'm okay.
If you're gonna do that though, do you guys remember what the Lakers did with KCP?
No, I don't remember.
KCP did like some 1 year, 17 or 18, which I know Lou Dort's young. You're not going to do 1 year, but I also don't think if you got to hit the salary floor, then you reduce the years on that and not commit so much long-term money to him, because like we just said, all these draft picks that they are compiling at some point, those rookie deals are going to come due. So how far do you want to extend Lou Dort out when you're going to have to pay those guys eventually?
That's true. And that's a good problem to have if it pops up in the future, but it's a fair point to mention that. So given all that we've seen so far, has your sort of picture of the landscape changed at all, Panos? Like, I think I would agree with Vonig when he says I would put the Clippers at 2 in the West right now.
I would.
A chance to challenge the Warriors. I mean, the Warriors lost Gary Payton. Did they lose someone else in free agency?
They lost Lee,
Toscano,
Dame.
They did retain Kevin Looney, which I think was necessary, but
they lost
an indication.
They lost Otto Porter and
that's right,
and Bielitsa too.
Yeah, Bielitsa went to overseas or something.
Yeah,
gotcha. But do you think that would you still put the Warriors at number 1 in the West right now?
Yes. I mean, they have Poole. They still have Kuminga, who's raw, but I mean, he has 1 year under his belt. Wiseman's coming back. We'll see how he is in his second year. You still have Clay, who hopefully I'm assuming he's going to look better than he did this year, and Curry and Green. So, and you brought Looney back. I think they're still the favorites until someone knocks them off. I do have, like Vonnie said, you have the Clippers at 2. I think they're one of the best teams out in the league right now. And then it's kind of a toss-up because I don't have the Mavs up there. Luka needs help and he's not getting any. I don't see Memphis early on because Jackson just got a surgery done, right? He's out 4 to 6 months. Yeah. So probably Brandon Clark will start in his place. We'll see what happens. And then you have the Wolves, like Vonnie, like he's a top 4, top 5. It's kind of weird. I need to see what happens. And Blazers, I don't care how loyal Lillard is. That team is not going anywhere. And you just gave Simmons, I think, $100 million contract.
Yeah, that raised my eyebrows a lot.
Your third best team, and we'll see how these guys come back healthy, but it's the Nuggets, dude. Jokic.
Oh, that's right. I forgot.
Jokic has been covering, like he's literally had the team on his back for the last season and a half. And if Michael Porter Jr. and Murray come back healthy, dude, that Nuggets team is awesome.
Absolutely.
To see them healthy, so that team's top 3 for sure in the West.
Yeah, those are your top 3 right there.
I would say Murray was actually fairly healthy during the playoffs, but he wanted to be conservative. Like he was working out pretty significantly during their first round series with the Warriors, but then they just thought that it wasn't worth it. It was probably an indication that they weren't going to beat the Warriors, like internally. But I think with this entire offseason, for him to continue working his way back, we'll probably see a Jamal Murray that's like locked and loaded for opening day in October. Michael Porter Jr., I'm not as sure about what his status is. He has been subject to a lot of injuries over the course of his short career. So if he comes back, then yeah, absolutely. You got to put Denver in contention with number 3. So that means you guys are a little bit bearish on Memphis due to the Jaren Jackson Jr. injury news. I know you are, Panos. What about you, Vanek?
Yeah, I agree. Another guy that, you give a max contract to, but he's just consistently hurt. So I'm with Panos on that.
Gotcha.
And I think this, and I'm not trying to disrespect the Phoenix Suns. I think there's just a lot out there that's still gray, right? We know they're going to have to move on from Ayton because that relationship's been burned. And then obviously any movement from all this Durant speculation could really tip a team into that mix, right? So if Durant goes to the Suns in some way without completely ravaging that team, then yeah, the Suns are back in that mix. But I think another year older of Chris Paul and then losing right now, they're just, they should have capitalized on that window 2 years ago when they made it to the finals against the Bucks.
Yeah, it's hard to come up with a true maybe top 5 in the West given all the moving pieces, especially as it relates to Phoenix and potentially Utah. But is there someone in the West that you think is due for a breakout that could surprise us? Like, do you think New Orleans can keep improving and move up into like a 5-6 range after being, I think they were the 9 seed and they made it through the play-in, but do you think they're a team to watch in terms of trying to break into that top 5-6 mix?
100%. That's the team that everybody needs to be. That's the next up and comer. Just like the Memphis Grizzlies were kind of just always hovering at the 8 seed spot. Now all of a sudden, the Grizzlies are a topic of discussion. The Pelicans are for sure that team. Between Ingram, if Zion comes back healthy, they add CJ McCollum. They have a lot of like raw young guys with Herb Jones. They just drafted one of the guys we talked about in our podcast with Dyson Daniels. They have a lot of different versatility, like as far as defensive guys, 3-point shooting guys, hard-nosed guys. So I like their roster. I think if you're the Pelicans, you're feeling really, really good about this upcoming season, as long as Zion shows up.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Do you think that trading for KD makes sense for them? Because that's been a team that's been labeled as having the collection of pieces required to make this deal work. But is that something that New Orleans should think about? I'll ask you that, Panos. Do you think bringing KD into the Pelicans makes sense for them?
I mean, it makes sense to them, but does it make sense to KD? Like, does KD want to go there? I know, like, Bonnie was saying, players are dictating where they want to go and stuff, but like, I think he'd be great, honestly, with the Pelicans. I don't know who they give up. I'm sure they would definitely ask for Zion, and they're going to say
it's either Zion or Brandon Ingram, right?
Well, the package will be built either around Zion or Ingram, and they're going to do a hard pass on Zion. So you're going to have to figure out and build something around Ingram, which Ingram is not a bad guy. I mean, he can play pretty good. So
he's been progressing through the league nicely. You see improvement each year. I think he's like a 25 point per game scorer now. And without Zion last year, there were no issues with him carrying the scoring load. So I want to close by talking a little bit about Jalen Brunson going to the Knicks. The writing was on the wall from the draft. The Knicks made the trade, and it really surprised no one that Jalen Brunson ended up spurning the Mavericks to go to the Knicks. He has family ties with the Knicks. So Vanek, I'll ask you, 4 years, $104 million. We've talked about this, that this is going to distort the evaluation of Jalen Brunson as a player. But what do you think he brings to the Knicks? Because we're going to be like the Knicks are always part of the discussion just because they're in New York. They're like the Lakers, but they've been even more hopeless than the Lakers for a longer period of time. So is this free agent signing destined to blow up in their face and really fail? Or do you think Jalen Brunson can improve and maybe make this contract seem reasonable?
I would bet against it. I like Brunson. I think he's a very good basketball player, but I think it's an overpay. And I totally think it's a typical Knicks move. I don't think it moves the needle for them at all in terms of like, hey, man, like they're going to be a bubble team. They're going to be on the play-in. But for Brunson and his story and all that kind of stuff, like his dad played for the Knicks. They do have a need at point guard, which they've been trying to address for the last decade. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just, there's not enough of a sample for me with Brunson to feel confident about that contract to say like, yeah, this is our guy. We're going to give him, $100+ million for the next, and he's going to run the show. Like I'm not giving that type of a contract to somebody that showed me like, half a season of good basketball.
Right. And the East, it looks like it's exploitable. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, we have a pretty solid top four. Then we're talking about Atlanta and Toronto potentially as 5-6 range. Is it possible for the Knicks to get into the playing conversation, Panos, or are they still the same old Knicks that we've come to expect?
I think at best it's playing for them. I don't see them cracking 8 at all, like top 8. It's at best playing. There's no way. I can't see it. Brunson doesn't move the needle for me at all. Like Vonnie said, half a season of play and you gave him $100 million, whatever it was, 104. Way overpaid. He wasn't even consistent in the playoffs. So, I mean, I'm not sold on that.
Yeah, and we also have to think about what the Luka effect is. When you're playing with Luka, you're just naturally going to be having less attention on you. And I know during the early portion of the Utah series, when Luka was out, Jalen Brunson really made his money in those first 2 or 3 games when he just went off and had a career game. I think he scored like 40 in game 2 against Utah. So I think he just made his money off of that performance, but it remains to be seen if he can actually elevate New York, because like the weight of the world is going to be on his shoulders. There's going to be a lot of expectation, and New York's personnel group does not resemble what Dallas's was. Like you're going to have to deal with like Mitchell Robinson and Julius Randle. That's not really the formation of a 5-out type offense that he ran in Dallas. So there's questions about how he can work within that system. So yeah, it remains to be seen. Is there anything else that was interesting to you guys over the first like 4 or 5 days of free agency? I'll turn it to you, Panos.
I mean, we didn't really talk about it, but I mean, it's destined. It's going to happen. Kyrie is trying to force his way to the Lakers. I mean, 1 year left on his contract. He opted in. They kind of have some leverage there with the Lakers do have some leverage just because no one else wants to trade for him. So we'll see what happens.
Right.
I mean, yeah, so we'll see what happens. Like they probably don't even have to offer picks. Let's see what happens. They can walk away for nothing, or you can get something from him in return. So, Russ is going to be gone eventually. It just not if, but when. You know what I mean? So I'm looking forward to that. I think it's a better fit for sure. And I think the holdup with some of these is picks, maybe, or definitely picks. And then is it going to be Joe Harris or is it going to be Steph Curry? And I think the Lakers want the cheaper contract out of that. They both shoot almost 44% from 3, almost the average identical, like 11 points, just maybe field goal percentage is a little bit better with Joe Harris. And assists is a little bit lower, but they don't want Joe Harris's 18 million contract a year. It's not going to help with their tax. You know what I mean?
So if we're talking about a potential deal, it would be Kyrie and Seth Curry for Russ and picks, or what do you think that deal would look like in practice?
I mean, those two for Russ picks, maybe, and you might have to throw in like a THT in there or a none. I know the backup plan is most likely going to be if that falls through, you're going to go Lakers, same thing, Russ, THT, maybe none or something, or just THT and Russ and maybe a pick or two. And you're going to go after Hield and Miles Turner. And that might be a good fit too. That might be a better fit too as well. So it just depends. They have 2 options, but that's the backup plan. That's plan B. But we want Kyrie.
Okay, I'll turn it to you, Vonig. So let's talk a little bit about this Kyrie potential trade to LA. So if it's him, LeBron, and AD, where do the Lakers stack up in the West? Given what we know about Kyrie's drama, like he forced his way out of Boston, essentially. He went to Brooklyn. Everything looked like it was rosy and great. And that just blew up in everybody's face. So now he goes to LA back with his old teammate, LeBron, another very talented player that's had injury history with Anthony Davis. Can this team be a top 4 team in the West with those 3 and a collection of veterans they find in the bargain bin, or what are your thoughts on that?
One, I wish nothing but the worst for the Lakers organization. I don't even understand why any team goes out of their way to help this franchise. Let them rot with Russ. because every other team that ever gets put in this situation doesn't get bailed once he's in and out from a crappy contract or a crappy deal. So it's garbage that this is even a topic of discussion. But because Kyrie thinks he's, the next Kobe, he's going to wear his jersey number or whatever the hell he's going to do. And he's going to stage his way across the USA.
That means Panos likes him because he's a Kobe truther. So Kyrie's also on the list.
You know what Kyrie really is? He's incredibly talented. He's a really shitty actor if you've ever watched Uncle Drew. And he's also a franchise killer. So minus winning a championship with Cleveland, ask Boston how they feel about Kyrie. Now ask the Nets how they feel about Kyrie. He is poison. He's a space cadet. He's saging the locker room more than he's playing basketball. He thinks he is the end all be all, and he knows everything that nobody else knows. And he's the smartest person in the room. And he has these deep, deep meanings and reasons why he does the things that he does. The millionaire basketball player. So, Kyrie going to the Lakers, absolutely an improvement over Russ, because we know what the Lakers did with Russ last year. But there is so many variables with that combination of LeBron, again, another year older. What is he going to be, 39? And at some point, he's going to get caught on one of these drug tests, so he's not dunking from the free throw line. I don't know what illegal substances he's using. Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis, Mr. I haven't touched a basketball in months. The string bean, street clothes guy that plays basketball like every other month, can't stay on the court. And then Kyrie, who, whether he's talking about the vaccine or just being Kyrie and going on a hiatus, plays 25% of the season. So are these guys all talented, and could they be a top 4 seed? Should they be a top 4 seed? Yes. But that combination and gambling on all 3 of those, health, mental health, and all the other variables that come in, I mean, it's going to be a hard thing to prove.
Let's just say they're 100% healthy. They're probably a top 2, top 3 team, and they're probably one of the favorites to win the championship, right? But the thing that Kyrie gives the Lakers that Russ can't give us, he's a walking bucket when he wants to be. He can create his own shot. He has a great mid-range, great IQ. He can knock the 3 down. He's in that 50, 40, 90 club with Steph Curry. I mean, Lakers haven't had that in a long, long time, where there's a walking bucket and it was a Black Mamba who can get a shot whenever he wants. I mean, this would be probably the best fit for him, but where's his mental at? You know what I mean? Is he going to take a leave of absence, go on vacation? It just depends. And then, yes, he's a big help, but I think still AD is priority here. It's all about his health. You need your guy around.
Yeah, they seem destined for each other. Panos is probably welcoming Kyrie in with open arms. Can't wait to run it back this way as long as we get to dump Russ in the deal. They're meant for each other. But what about Russ going to the Nets? Vonnig, I'll ask you this. If KD is on the Nets and he gets reunited with Russell Westbrook, what would that be like? That would be something else too.
One, Durant, it's not going to happen, because Durant, I don't think, has any wanting of reuniting with Russ. And then for me, again, Rockets fan bias. Yeah, dude, you want to send Russ to the Nets? I'm all for it, man. The sooner they're bad, like I said, we get their picks. I just don't see an OKC reunion happening in Brooklyn. So that's just going to push Durant to get out of there even quicker. So yeah, it's not going to be fun times, and all of a sudden winning basketball in Brooklyn. Russell Westbrook and Ben Simmons on the same team might be the most comical thing that we could talk about.
Yep.
The 2 players that cannot shoot are literally going to have the ball, passing it back and forth to each other and be like, you shoot it. No, you shoot it. And then, you know what? Russ, because he's a little bit more confident, he's going to shoot it and it's going to fly over the backboard.
You're right. That would be something to see if we do get to see that trade, but still a lot to happen in front of us as it relates to dominoes falling in free agency. We will be back soon to discuss it. We'll go into a little bit more detail about KD's speculation, where he would go, what makes sense. But please like and subscribe this video. Thanks a lot for joining us on the Boozers Basketball Podcast. We will see you all very soon. Happy 4th of July.
See you guys.